achieve. Particularly about cars.
Here we go.
This is a true and not wrong thing.
Okay, so that's the reasonably benign situation in Wellington. And Christchurch still not too bad either, by the way, Caitlin, is it?
I've actually failed to check Christchurch.
All right, but it was looking all right last time.
It was looking all right. I'm not seeing any alerts on Twitter about it.
Okay. The All Whites playing Peru at Lima's Estadio Nacional. Do or die for the World Cup in Russia. Jacob McSweeney, hello.
Jacob's running. He's running as we speak. He's about to walk in.
He's running like
Here he is.
Peruvian players.
Hi.
Hello. What's it looking like? I can see the scoreboard.
What did I say before? Nailing the coffin. I'm bringing the kitchen sink in now. That's what the All Whites seem to be doing. They are really going for it now, which is actually, I mean, this might be the best part of the game to be watching. We're actually sending everyone forward. Peru is defending. They are hitting the ground with any injury and trying to soak up the time, and that's what they'll be wanting to do.
Wow, you should be a sports commentator.
Yeah, you should. That's right. You get paid more money, Jacob. Okay, so we're trying not to sound too despondent, but it's probably only 10 minutes to go, isn't it?
Less. Oh yeah, about
Less.
10 minutes with injury time.
Okay.
Yeah, it's looking good for Peru. I think if they end up winning this, it'll be their first World Cup, I think, since 1982 or 78,
which is nice for
82.
Yeah,
really nice for them. Considering that they are usually sort of 7th or 8th in South America, they don't often get this opportunity. Considering their opposition, they play against Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, Chile, bigger, better footballing nations than them usually. So a really, really massive day for them. And as we were saying earlier, that public holiday.
Hey.
Yeah.
That's right. The other plus of their victory. All right, thank you. Not a victory yet, though. Jacob.
We only get a public holiday when there's a train strike.
Well, some people probably did. Jacob McSweeney, thank you for your sterling service today. David Slack has completely turned around and is simply watching the football on the television set. 2-0.
I'm engrossed.
2-0 in Peru.
Let me turn back to Twitter.
Have I got time to ask you about Auckland property? I probably haven't about Auckland property valuations, and it's going to. I noticed when Rowan was talking earlier, it's going to be covered on Checkpoint. Actually, I will ask you something though. In 2014, the average. You see, we've wondered in recent discussions if Auckland property is trending down, and it may be, but not according to the council's new property valuations. 100% plus hikes in value right on the fringes. And in 2014, the average residential property in Auckland was $581,000. It's now $1,076,000 in terms of valuation. That is a staggering increase.
Oh, God, is it ever. And I can remember just a few months, well, no, maybe about a year ago when I was writing columns talking about $1 million houses, and people were saying, oh, you're exaggerating, it's not that bad. Well, there you go, pal. It is. But it will be cruel won't it, if rates rises correspond with declining real value in Auckland homes as the tide turns a bit. That'll be tough for people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. And absolutely, I'm sorry, Victoria, is about all the time I have. It's been an interesting action-packed hour, though, what with the traffic reports and the football reports. Victoria Stewart, lovely to have your company.
Great to be here, Jim. Thank you.
And David Slack, very nice to see you back too.
Lovely to be back. Nice to talk with you, Victoria.
And
we
you.
return tomorrow. Thank you for listening to us today, everybody. And Rowan Quinn, very shortly on Checkpoint.
Kia ora everyone, I'm Rowan Quinn and on behalf of our excellent team, haere mai, welcome to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Tonight is the dream over for the All Whites. We'll go to Lima where it's currently 2-0 to Peru with just 3 minutes to go in their World Cup qualifier. Also tonight, 3 members of a Putaruru family could be permanently paralysed after eating wild boar. We speak to 2 family friends. The parents of an autistic boy repeatedly kept in seclusion room react to a report by the Chief Ombudsman criticising the boy's school and the Ministry of Education. Plus, we're live on the red carpet of the New Zealand Music Awards. That's all coming up after the news.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batanaho. The average home in Auckland is now valued officially at more than $1 million with the release of the council's 3-yearly rating valuation. Homes across the city have risen on average by 46% in the past 3 years, with some outer and southern suburbs up by 60 or 70%. Individual property data won't be available until Monday. The Auckland Council Treasurer John Bishop says says it is that detail, not the big average increase, that will determine the level of individual rates rises.
It's merely an allocation mechanism, so whether they increase by 10%, 100% or go down, it really depends on where you sit compared to the average on the impact it'll have on your rate bill at the end of the day.
John Bishop, the Auckland Council Treasurer. The Chief Ombudsman has criticised an Invercargill school and the Ministry of Education for letting down an autistic boy who was kept in seclusion. The parents raised concerns about their son being taken from his classroom and placed in a small corner room at Rugby Specialist School's main site between 2011 and 2014. Timothy Brown reports.
The Chief Ombudsman, Peter Boscher, has called on the school to give a written apology to the family. He says the parents were instrumental in bringing about law change which banned children being put in seclusion rooms at schools. While Mr Boscher found no evidence of unlawful behaviour, according to legislation at the time, he says the school's use of the room to manage the boy's behaviour was unreasonable. The ministry has welcomed the report and says schools now have clear guidance on using restraint and seclusion. This is Timothy Brown.
A family friend says the 3 adults at Waikato Hospital with suspected food poisoning remain in a vegetative state nearly a week on. Sibu Babu is in a serious condition in the high dependency unit at Waikato Hospital. Her husband Shibu Kochiman and his mother Alikati Daniel, who was visiting from India, are stable in a ward. It's understood health officials are testing wild boar the family had eaten on the night they became ill. Sojan Joseph told Checkpoint he visited the 3 last night. He says they remain unresponsive as they were when they were admitted on Friday.
He's not able to talk, or he's not even responding to any of us or the surroundings. So we just really don't know what's going on.
Sojan Joseph says the couple's 2 children are being cared for by members of their church. The Prime Minister has shot down questions from the National Party in Parliament about the government's planned changes to paid parental leave. The Labour-led government is pushing a bill through Parliament to extend paid parental leave up to 26 weeks by 2020. National wants support for an amendment allowing both parents to be allowed to take leave together. Jacinda Ardern told the House it was something she'll look at in the future. National's Deputy Paula Bennett asked her how that would be received by families. In response, Ms Ardern cited the previous National government's record.
I think parents will appreciate that unlike the last government, we're extending paid parental leave to 26 weeks and I think it's disappointing, given the vehemency that the member's showing, that she didn't use the opportunity when in government to pursue this issue.
Jacinda Ardern. The body of slain Auckland woman Arishma Chand is on its way back to Fiji for the funeral. The 24-year-old was killed after returning home from a party in the early hours of Sunday morning. Eva Corlett reports.
Arishma Chand came home about 1 o'clock on Sunday morning with her boyfriend. He left and shortly after Ms Chand called her parents, saying she was scared someone was outside the house. When they arrived 20 minutes later, they found her dead in a bedroom. A 41-year-old man who has interim name suppression was arrested in Flatbush yesterday and appeared in the Manukau District Court this morning. He was remanded in custody until his next appearance in the High Court next month. A family friend says there was a ceremony for Arishma Chand at an Auckland Indian funeral home last night. Her body was flown to Fiji this afternoon and the funeral will be held in Suva on Friday. Ko Eva Corlett, Tēnei.
A soldier was today dismissed from the army at his court-martial for threatening to share nude photos of a woman. Private Thomas William Evans admitted telling the woman in March 2014 that he would share naked photos of her if she refused to let him meet her parents. Private Evans started a relationship with the woman in 2013. The Defence Force prosecutor, Colonel Craig Rowan, says problems arose when the woman was moving overseas.
In the month leading up to the complainant moving to the United Kingdom, the accused said that he wanted to meet her family and wanted her to tell her family about him. The complainant did not want to do so. The accused said that he would turn up at the airport to see her family and to meet them. The accused threatened that if the complainant did not tell her parents about him, he was going to post referred to as nudie Rudy photos on the internet and send them to her friends.
Craig Rowan, the Defence Force prosecutor. State Highway 6 near Harihari on the west coast is closed after a fatal crash this afternoon. A woman was killed and 6 people injured when a van rolled near the small rural settlement. Tracy Neal reports.
Police say the state highway is closed while the serious crash unit investigates the accident. They say the road is expected to be closed for some time and the public should expect delays. Police say the woman died at the scene while emergency services were helping 6 others in the vehicle. The road toll for the year to date is now 325, 44 more than at the same time last year. This is Tracy Neal.
And in Wellington today, the predicted commuter chaos because of a 24-hour train strike hasn't happened. The Transport Agency says this morning traffic was heavy earlier than usual on the main highways into Wellington, but the congestion eased quickly. And so far tonight, traffic out of Wellington is moving well. It's 5:06. Sport and the All Whites World Cup dream is seemingly over, trailing Peru 2-0 with only minutes to play in the second leg of the World Cup qualifier in Lima. New Zealand went into the match with high hopes after holding Peru to a 0-0 draw in the first leg in Wellington last weekend. New Zealand's best scoring chance in the first half came right on the break when the skipper Winston Reid rose above the Peru defence only to head the ball over the bar. South Africa Rugby is questioning the transparency of the World Cup allocation process after missing out to France for the hosting of the 2023 tournament. The World Rugby Council went against a recommendation by its own committee that South Africa should host the event. Strong lobbying over the past couple of weeks promoting a better fan experience and a guaranteed financial return of $230 million swung the vote to the French. The Deputy President of South Africa Rugby, Mark Alexander, is adamant there have been breaches of lobbying rules.
There was a set of rules. We abided by those rules up till today. Certain rules were broken during that process, which we upset about. This is the first time ever World Rugby has made a recommendation and they voted against it.
Mark Alexander, that's the news.
Australia votes yes.
It is a wonderful time in Australia. It's great to see so many people celebrating and we're so very happy.
Soccer fever in Peru.
Once they realise we're from New Zealand, either chuck out a cheeky smile or tell us Arriba Peru.
A cordial coup in Zimbabwe.
The mood in Harare is rather jovial, if the truth be told.
John Campbell.
And Kim Hill. Well, really, get a life.
Oh, my Lord.
Good God.
John turned nasty on Thursday. Morning Report, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, currently no meningococcal vaccines are funded for New Zealand children. A UK expert urges a rethink. And after 10, from Mad Max to Water Rats, that always colourful and sometimes poetic life of the veteran Australian actor Steve Bisley. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland to Whanganui, including Coromandel Bay of Plenty, the Central High Country and Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Scattered showers today, mainly inland, some heavy and thundery with hail south of Auckland and Taupō. Mainly fine tomorrow, apart from isolated showers about the ranges and eastern Northland. Manawatu to Wellington also wide at upper, mostly fine today, cloudy periods tomorrow with isolated showers mainly about the ranges. Nelson Buller and Westland, fine spells, isolated afternoon and evening showers about the ranges. Marlborough and Canterbury, mainly fine today, cloud and a few showers developing tomorrow. Otago and Southland, mainly fine, scattered showers spreading north overnight, clearing tomorrow afternoon. Fiordland, patchy drizzle developing by evening, turning to widespread rain overnight, becoming fine tomorrow. The Chatham Islands cloudy periods with the odd shower tomorrow. It is 5:09 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks, Katrina. Kia ora, good evening. I'm Rowan Quinn in for John Campbell tonight on Checkpoint. Well, in the past few minutes, the all-whites Russian dreams are over. They've been knocked out 2-1 by Peru before a passionate crowd in Lima. That means they won't be going to the World Cup in Russia next year. Peru dominated in the first half of the game with a goal by Jeremy Farfan, and that put the all-whites in a precarious position. Then, in the second half, Christian Ramos sealed the deal and broke the hearts of Kiwi football fans. Well, Simon Hampton is a reporter at the game in Lima and he joins me now. Hello, Simon.
Hello.
What is happening around you right now?
Well, there's absolute pandemonium in the crowd. There's flares going off, red flares. Everyone's dancing, chanting. There's a bunch of daring fans who have jumped onto the pitch. This crowd is celebrating extremely hard. 35 years in the making, this game. This win, Peru is off to the World Cup. It is quite incredible to see.
When did you get the feeling that they knew that they had it in the bag?
I don't think they ever did. But I tell you, when that first goal went in, it was crazy scene in Lima. But this country has waited so long for a World Cup berth that it was never going to get complacent until the final whistle went.
What were the standout moments for you, Simon, watching there in the ground?
It was just the atmosphere of the whole thing, really. The crowd arrived 3 or 4 hours before the game. They're now all running down the length of the field. It's so hard to describe, really. The crowd is just absolutely loving it. I'm seeing people in tears. It's quite indescribable, really.
And the game itself, were you able to concentrate with all that going on around you?
Yeah, I was. Peru obviously came out firing very hard at the start. The All-Whites went down early and fought their way back into the match. But then when the second goal went in, it was all to do. The All-Whites had a few chances, but they weren't able to get a crucial goal at any point.
And what's it like being a New Zealander there today?
It's been fantastic. Yeah, the people here are very hospitable, wonderful people in Peru. They've been very lovely, and I imagine they'll be celebrating long and hard into the night.
And commiserating with you, no doubt.
What was that, sorry?
And commiserating with you, no doubt. And on that note, have you seen any other Kiwi fans?
There are a couple of Kiwi fans here, but I haven't been able to see them. It's just a sea of red and white at the moment, so I haven't been able to pick out any New Zealand fans.
Okay, look, thank you so much and enjoy your night. It sounds like it's going to be a good one there. That is Simon Hampton talking to us from the ground where the All Whites have just lost their game, had their World Cup hopes dashed. They won't be going to Russia next year. And now our reporter Emil Donovan is at the Four Kings in central Wellington. I imagine it's quite a different atmosphere there. He's surrounded by All Whites fans. Emil, how's everyone there?
Look, the mood is of defiant disappointment, I'd say. There was hope before the game. It was sort of permeating the bar like a fog, but it was hope of the heart rather than of the head. Not many people really expected that we'd get a result out of this, and the best that most people were hoping for was a scoring draw or a narrow loss. We ended up getting a narrow loss, but look, it wasn't enough to send us over the line. That being said, there is a lot of pride. The team acquitted themselves well right to the very last whistle, and I think they can hold their heads high.
There are a few kind of close moments, or maybe some chances there for the All Whites. Was there any excitement there when that happened?
Oh, look, there was a huge amount of excitement. The first half was a pretty dour affair, to be honest. There weren't that many chances, and actually the Peruvians kind of scored out of nowhere. Once Chris Wood came on at half-time, all 6'4" of him, it really emboldened the All Whites. They started to push forward, pass the ball into space a bit more, and he actually had a great chance on 50 minutes, a header from point-blank range that was just tipped over the bar, which, as you can imagine, caused quite some excitement here. But look, the Peruvians, were a class above. It has to be said. They were the better team, and they did deserve the victory, hard though that is to say.
Thanks very much, Emile. That's our reporter, Emile Donovan, there with disappointed All Whites fans. And one of them also is very much likely to be the former All Whites coach, Kevin Fallon. He's had a lot to do with the early development of some of the key players in this All Whites squad. He's been watching the game from the Windsor Castle Hotel in Parnell. Kevin, where did things go wrong today?
It was a tough call again. I mean, the first surprise was obviously when Chris Wood didn't start. And it's a bit of a mystery and will be a perpetual mystery until we find out it's probably something to do with his hamstring and the durability of it and whether it would have gone if it had started him from the start. But that was a bit of a handicap. And then we eventually got the lad on the field and unfortunately we dropped, well, as soon as he got to 2 goals, well, you might as well, that was it. We kept fighting, as we should do, but it was just about all over. I mean, at 1-0, no problem. We get 1-1 and we'll go through. But when it gets to 2, we need 2 goals. And we weren't likely to score 2 goals in Lima, so it's a bit disappointing. But overall, I think if you said to people, do you expect the All Whites to go to Lima and win against Peru, most people would be quite subjective and say, no, I don't think they'll win there.
Yeah, I mean, hindsight is a great thing, isn't it? But Chris Woods really injected some energy into the game when he came on. He had some good attempts. What do you think might have happened if he'd been on there from the start?
I think it might have been a little bit different and we might have got a goal, but it is a real mystery. I mean, we don't know what happened to him, so I think it's a real mystery. Once we find that out, I think we can look at it and start having a bit of sort of understanding of why that happened. I mean, I still don't know why it didn't start and particularly why it didn't start today. And I can only think of his legs would not have lasted 90 minutes.
Goals aside, were there any moments in the game where you thought Peru's too good?
Yeah, a couple in particular when Marinovic stretched and caught one in the mid-air. And there was another fantastic Marinovic save where, very much like in the first game, where he scooped it off the goal line. He had a couple there today which were fine saves, great reactions, and he's had a very good World Cup, the goalkeeper.
Yeah, he did some great saves. Would he be your man of the match?
Him or again Winston Reid. I thought Winston Reid once again showed the class, that he's got. A very classy player. Michael Boxall fought really hard. Woodsy when he came on, of course. Them probably 4 or 5 players did exceptionally well, but everybody tried hard. Nobody let anybody down. I mean, it just wasn't their day today. It's a real pity. I'm disappointed, obviously, but you've got to be realistic.
Absolutely. Well, thanks very much for joining us. That's the former All Whites coach, Kevin Fallon, talking to us about that 2-0 loss by the All Whites to Peru. Well, 3 members of a Putararu family could be permanently paralysed after eating what may have been contaminated wild boar. Shibu Kochuman, his wife Subi Babu and his mother Alakati Daniel remain in a serious condition in Waikato hospital after eating the boar, which Mr Kochuman had hunted for dinner last Friday night. The couple's 7- and 1-year-old daughters are being cared for by members of their Hamilton church while they fundraise to bring family members from India. Toxicology results are due tomorrow. Church members say the 7-year-old daughter has told them she and her sister were in bed when her parents and grandmother fell ill and called for an ambulance. One of those rallying around the family is church member Joji Varghese. I spoke with him this afternoon just after he'd visited the family in hospital and asked him to tell me what he knew.
Shibu is in the habit of, accompanying his friends on hunting trips. And he's done it many times. And this was a very normal situation. He's gone hunting with his friends. They hunted some wild boar. From what I understand, they consumed that boar on Friday for dinner after they had put the kids to bed. So the kids had not had any of this meat. Within about half an hour, they started to throw up. About 15 minutes later, Shibu rang the emergency services number. I'm not very sure who he spoke to. Was it the police or the ambulance. However, he fainted halfway through the conversation. And I'm also not sure who got there first. Was it the police or the ambulance? I do not know, but they found 3 unconscious adults, from what I understand, and 2 sleeping children. They were then taken to a Tokoroa hospital and transferred to Waikato hospital later on. Now, yep, go on. Sorry.
What state have they been in since then?
They have been in, it's best described as a vegetative state. So they do open their eyes. We can call it technically conscious, but they are unresponsive to any form of stimulus.
And have the doctors told you what could have caused this?
Now, this is the tricky part, because it is a process of elimination. The children have basically consumed everything else in whatever else they have consumed, with the exception of the wild boars. So by a process of elimination, the doctors think it is definitely some sort of poisoning within the boar itself. So maybe the boars consumed poison before it was shot down, and whatever was in its blood has found its way into theirs. Otherwise, without a proper toxicology report, they are not able to answer that question. The toxicology report is expected tomorrow. So once that comes through, a proper treatment plan will be put in place.
And Joji, I'm not sure if you've spoken to the doctors or to anyone who has. Is there any sense of how their recovery might be, how likely they are to recover well, and how long that might take?
Well, I have been told that this will leave some form of permanent damage. What form, we do not know. It could be partial paralysis, it could be tremors. It will depend on how well they respond to the treatment. Different people respond to treatments in different ways depending on their general health. But to find that out, we must first know what's actually in their system. Only then can a treatment be put in place. So at this stage, we're all awaiting that toxicology report, which is perhaps the most important player in this game.
Yeah, and is there any chance that the boar was shared with other people before they ate it?
We do not know that, so I'm not taking any guesses on it. I haven't heard. I'm going to take it as a no, but don't quote me on that. I do not know.
How are the children holding up?
Yes, they have 2 daughters aged 7 and 1. The first daughter, the younger one, is lactose intolerant, so she was being exclusively breastfed. Suddenly taking her off it is not doing her any good, so she's a bit touchy, but she's formed a bond with one of the church members, so I guess that's a good sign. The elder one, unfortunately, knows that her parents are hospitalized. Though she is with one of our church members, they have a job to do as well, and so we take turns in looking after the children. So unfortunately, they see a different face every 6 hours or so. That's not a very settling feeling. So at the moment, we are actively working with the Indian High Commission, who are they're really helpful. They've come on board with this. We're trying to get their immediate family over from India. That should happen in the next 3 or 4 days, and we can transfer the care of the children to them, so they see one face a day in and day out, and I'm hoping that'll make them feel more settled.
Yeah, so they don't have immediate family here in New Zealand?
No, none whatsoever.
Yeah, and so what needs to happen to get them here as fast as possible?
Well, they will need visas, visit visas. I've been informed by the Indian High Commission today to ask them to put in their application, and once that application is put in, which will happen today, they will fast-track it. I mean, this thing can happen overnight if need be.
So you're doing some fundraising for Mrs. Daniels, the grandmother in all of this. Why are you doing that?
Well, Mrs. Daniels is here on a visitor's visa, and a part of that process of applying for a visitor's visa is they will need the sponsor to pick up any medical costs that are associated. She was obviously ticked that box, but she does not have any medical insurance. And so this hospital bill is going to spiral out of control, especially because the estimated recovery time is somewhere between 4 to 6 months. That's part of the reason why we're doing this fundraising. The other part is when their immediate family does come over from India, they will need a place to stay. There will be costs associated around just daily life. The children will be with them, so there will be costs associated with that. Like I said, our initial plan was to send the children back home to their grandparents, but if they're going to continue here for 6 months, I expect the elder child to be bored out of her skin if she just stays at home doing nothing. She was attending school in Peru before this, so we'll have to find her admission to some school here in Hamilton, give her something to do, keep her occupied while all of this is happening.
Yeah, and have you been able to visit them at all, Joji?
Yeah, I was there today as well. I visit them on most days. In fact, I was there a couple of hours back.
And how are they doing today?
It's pretty much the same, say, other than involuntary random movements. Doctors have said, no, it's pretty much the same.
Meanwhile, that's the family friend Joji Varghese. He's the friend of those 3 people hospitalised after their meal of wild boar. Well, meanwhile, the chairman of the Game Animal Council, Don Hammond, says thousands of people eat wild pork every day, but he's never heard of anyone getting sick from eating game meat. He told our producer Bridget Burke that he feels there's more than meat to this.
Firstly, I'd just note that obviously very concerned about anyone who gets sick for any reason. Paralysis is a pretty severe thing, and I suspect there could be a lot more to it than simply game meat.
What do you mean by that, Don?
Look, I have no idea what these people ate, whether they have allergies, those sorts of things, but thousands of people every day in New Zealand eat wild pork that's been caught in the bush. That's a major source of protein in many small rural areas. And I've never heard of anybody getting sick from meat that's been looked after properly.
And there's no reports around the Putararu area that there is anything untoward circulating?
Absolutely not, to my knowledge. I mean, one of the things that people might wonder about is whether toxins have been used, and by and large, the majority of toxins that are used are. It's not possible to eat enough meat to gain sort of what you might call secondary poisoning. And I'm not aware of any diseases that have a human health impact through eating properly cooked meat. So honestly, not sure what's behind it, to be honest, Bridget.
Can you just talk to me about wild pork in particular? Of all the game, is pork the more treacherous to deal with?
Look, I don't think any game meat is more or less treacherous or difficult to deal with than any form of animal protein. The basic rules of cleanliness and hygiene apply. Keep it cold, keep it either in a fridge or in a cool place, keep the flies off it, look after it. It's a valuable resource, and if it's well looked after, it's a highly nutritious source of protein, and I don't believe wild pork is any more or less risk than wild venison or any other game meat.
We expect toxicology reports tomorrow, but in your experience, have you ever heard of anybody becoming paralytic or having a severe secondary infection as a result of eating game?
No, I've never heard of it. And myself and my family routinely eat game meat, as do many thousands of other people, and I've never heard of anybody becoming ill from eating game meat.
And that was the Game Animal Council Chair, Don Hammond, speaking to our producer, Bridget Burke there. Ruru Specialist School has been found to have been unreasonable in its use of a seclusion room to manage a disabled student's behaviour, but it didn't break the law. The Chief Ombudsman, Peter Bosher, investigated the Invercargill school's use of a seclusion room after parents complained to him after discovering their son was being restrained and put inside the room. He's concluded in a report that the school unreasonably used the room to manage the boy's behaviour, failed to consult with his parents and didn't keep sufficient insufficient records. Peter Boscher says the boy, who was at a satellite classroom, was transported to the room between 40 and 60 times, but it was unclear how many times he'd actually been put inside the room. The boy's father, Callum Turnbull, spoke exclusively to Checkpoint producer Michelle Cook.
The school has admitted to 4 times put out of those restraints and taken back to the base school. I've only 4 times been put into the seclusion room itself. I doubt those figures. I doubt that the school is if he's been restrained 60 times and taken back to the base school. It seems hard to believe that only 4 times he was placed in that room.
What do you make of the Ombudsman's report?
We're slightly disappointed with the report. We didn't think it probably uncovered the actual practice of what was going on at Ruru School, because I guess it was only narrowed to our son and the 4 years that he attended the school. I think it's sort of by narrowing it that to only our son, it didn't overall give a look at other evidence that may have been relevant. This was explained to us that it was narrowed because he will only look at a complaint from parents about a child, and we're only looking to that child. But we're talking about a room that was used since 1999, over a 15-year period, and we believe that a lot of that information was relevant and this wasn't regarded in the report.
Sure. That's one thing that the report that the Ombudsman raises, is that the ministry was aware and had a stance by 1998, if not before, that seclusion should not be used. And as you say correctly, that this room was used since 1999 in Ruru Specialist School.
Yes, it appears that policies were made by the ministry in 1998 that regarded, I think they even went to saying time out was not to be used as a whole. But yes, in 1999, the ministry built a purpose-built seclusion room. Katrina Casey confirmed that this was the case in her release to us, that it was a purpose-built seclusion room, which seems to be a little bit contrary to, if you're releasing policies in 1998 not to use time out, why would you be building seclusion rooms in 1999 and funding them? And then sort of walking away from them and letting the school manage them how they see fit, which is a recipe for disaster, I think.
The Ombudsman also said, one of the things that he said very strongly in his report was that the school needs to offer you an apology. They need to apologise to you in writing if you are willing to accept that apology. Are you?
No. No, the school has never accepted sort of any responsibility. In fact, they've gone as far as telling and newsletters telling the public that they have abided by all policies in the past and the present, which the Ombudsman found they weren't. They have told the community that the safe room that they have been using is, they absolutely agree with that. What they were doing was correct. It just doesn't seem right that a forced apology by the Ombudsman for a school that is refusing to acknowledge that what they've been doing could even be possibly wrong, is valid or even offers. And the other thing is that, are we accepting an apology on all the children since 1999 and the 36 other schools that were using seclusion that the MOE did a survey on and said yes to having seclusion rooms? Who are we accepting this? Is it just for our son? Because it just seems too big to accept an apology just for one child, and we think that there's been probably at the school, possibly 100 children or more secluded, hundreds of times over the 14-year period. It just doesn't seem right that we accept an apology, a forced apology like that.
And I know you removed your son from the school about 3 years ago now. How is he? How is he doing?
Yeah, he's really good. Dramatic improvement from what he was at school, to what he is now. Since he's we've had him homeschooled, and that we can make sure that he's safe and well. We've been able to take him off all his medication, and he's made huge gains. huge gains. We can't believe actually the improvement that he's made since leaving the school, just by just being in a calm environment where you know, you're just taking away the stress levels of what was going on at that school.
And Checkpoint can confirm that the Independent Police Conduct Authorities launched a second investigation into the police's re-investigation into the use of seclusion at Ruru Specialist School. And now here's Katrina Batten with the headlines.
The All Whites have gone down 2-0 in their Football World Cup qualifier against Peru and Lima. Peru dominated possession and territory throughout the match, going 1-0 up half an hour into the game. Peru sealed the win with a second goal midway through the second half. The win qualifies Peru for their first World Cup since 1982. A family friend says the 3 adults at Waikato Hospital with suspected food poisoning remain in a vegetative state nearly a week on. Subi Babu is in a serious condition in the high dependency unit. Her husband, Shibu Kochaman, and his mother, Elakati Daniel, who was visiting from India, are stable in a ward. It's understood health officials are testing wild boar the family had eaten on the night they became ill. The average home in Auckland is now valued officially at more than $1 million, with the release of the council's 3-yearly rating valuation. Homes across the city have risen on average by 46% in the past 3 years, with some outer and southern suburbs up by 60 or 70%. Individual property data won't be available until Monday. The Chief Ombudsman has criticised an Invercargill school and the Ministry of Education for letting down an autistic boy who was kept in seclusion. The parents raised concerns about their son being taken from his classroom and placed in a small corner room at Ruru Specialist School's main site between 2011 and 2014. The body of slain Auckland woman Arishma Chand is on the way back to Fiji for the funeral. The 24-year-old was killed after returning home from a party in the early hours of Sunday morning. And a woman has died after a van rolled on State Highway 6 at Harihari on the west coast. The police say the road is down to 1 lane while the serious crash unit investigates. 6 others in the van were injured. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6.
Thanks, Katrina. And turning to business news now with Nona Peltier. And Nona, the building supplies company Steel and Tube says its half-year earnings are going to be well below last year's. What's behind that?
Yeah, they've cut their forecast by $9 to $10 million below well, they earned last year, the same period, $16 million. So they're expecting to earn about $6 million, and that's after really a tough year, which, you know, they had some issues with steel rods. So there was an investigation by RNZ into that. Their chief executive quit abruptly, and overall they just had a hard time. They're going to restructure. It's going to be 2 years of really hard work to put the company back onto a strong footing. So yeah, not so great. And the market didn't like that very much. Their share price fell 1%.
Oh, and Pushpay Holdings, which that company provides payment systems to churches, and that's going to list in the United States. Have they said why they're doing that?
Yeah, because most of the churches that they provide services to, surprise, surprise, in the United States. So they think that by listing in the U.S., they'll be able to put themselves into a stronger position to attract further investment and build their brand in the U.S., which is where most of their business is. And that company is going very strongly, and the market loved that. Their share price ended up 3%, so very good. Overall, the top 50 index rose more than 0.4% by 35 points to 8,035, which is pretty good because the markets have been a little bit cool with energy stocks, not as strong as they have been, mostly because there's expectations that there's a bit of a glut and demand won't be as strong as people were hoping. And the New Zealand dollar was a little bit weaker, and that's primarily because the US dollar was a little bit stronger. People are expecting more interest rate hikes there than had been previously anticipated. So we're at 68.5 US cents, 90.2 Australian and 52 pence.
Thank you very much for that, Nona Peltier there. And Auckland is officially a $1 million home city, with the council's revaluation of properties showing the average values jumped 46% across the region. That's since the last council check 3 years ago. But it'll be Monday before Auckland ratepayers can check what their own home might have done. And our Auckland correspondent Todd Nile reports.
It's Auckland's real estate version of the Dance of the Seven Veils. Today the council unveiled the average change in values in 241 suburbs, but not individual properties. These show big suburb-by-suburb variations in the average rise, which take the average value to just short of $1.1 million. Well above average are suburbs on the northwestern fringe, Westgate up 86%, Whenuapai 74%. By contrast, more expensive central suburbs, such as St Mary's Bay, are lagging, up 32%, and Ponsonby 38%. Cheaper, especially southern suburbs, have risen more sharply, Manarewa East 62% and Papakura 65%. So what's going on? I asked the council's principal valuer, Peter Mackay, why rural Pairata in the south was up a staggering 151%.
Those big increases are primarily reflective of properties that we've classified as residential blockland where there's potential for subdivision, so they're not reflective of normal residential single-unit properties.
It's land that drives the movers, such as the northwest and other fringe areas where new large subdivisions are delivering high-priced homes. The Treasurer, John Bishop, says even the suburb-level figures mask variations of as much as 20%, and homeowners can't draw conclusions yet.
It's merely an allocation mechanism, so whether they increase by 10%, 100% or go down, it really depends on where you sit compared to the average on the impact it'll have on your rate bill at the end of the day.
Among new factors this time around are the implementation of the city's new development blueprint, the Unitary Plan, which increases the housing density possible on some sections and therefore their value. But there's still a lot the council can't yet say, such as whether the spread of winners and losers in terms of what happens to their rates bills is the same as 3 years ago.
We haven't done that analysis, but again, given the way it works, you'd expect as many to go up as many to go down. I mean, we haven't compared it with 2014.
Back in 2014, I think there was something like 22% ended up with rates decreases. Does that proportion happen each time?
Look, I haven't got that data with me, to be fair. And again, the valuations just got signed off yesterday, so we haven't done that work.
From Monday, ratepayers in Auckland can go online and see whether their property's value has risen above average and might face an above-average rate rise next year. In 2014, public interest in individual valuations crashed the council's website. Even if homeowners can manage to ferret out their property's valuation, though, they still won't know what it means for them in dollar terms for nearly a year when the new rates are set. I Tamaki Makoro mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko Todd Nile tēnei.
Fears of commuter chaos in the capital during the 24-hour train strike have proved unfounded, as Wellington's workforce heeded warnings to leave earlier or later or work from home. However, the industrial dispute between the Rail and Maritime Transport Union and the company running the trains seems to be hardening, with each side accusing the other of lying and bullying. Ruth Hill reports from Wellington.
It was beautiful, Wellington. Like in wartime, people came together. Strangers offered rides to strangers at bus stops and on Facebook. People queued in an orderly fashion for buses. And on the roads, which were a little more congested than usual, courtesy prevailed. Commuters spoken to by RNZ seemed remarkably sanguine.
I left home a lot earlier.
I just had to get a bus, but a lovely random couple picked me up. It was really nice. Yes, I'm here at the same time as I would be.
I had to get the bus in from Porirua, and then I got a transfer bus, so from there to Johnsonville, and then get on another bus.
Other than coming in early, but no dramas at all.
On the picket line outside Wellington Railway Station, engineer Vaughan Davidson says they've had good support from the public.
We do understand it's inconvenience to the public, but we have to make a stand somewhere along the lines. The company Hana Rota are trying to take away our rights and stuff like that, so we just want to make a stand.
Yeah.
Transdev's managing director, Alan Bannister, says the changes include flexible working hours and Sunday work for some train engineers.
Are not about eroding the rights of the workers. In fact, they're all about increasing the offer to the workers, which is broadly 2% across the board. The changes to the terms and conditions are all about productivity. It makes no financial difference to the company, but it does make a productive difference, which our customers will benefit from.
Mr Bannister accuses the union of bullying and misleading union members about the company's offer. The union categorically denies there's been any coercion. Union organiser Howard Phillips says it's Transdev, which took over the contract from Kiwi Rail in July last year, that's refusing to negotiate in good faith and trying to claw back long-established terms and conditions. These include double time pay on Sundays and the ability to decline to work on a statutory holiday. The union is also worried about a proposal to cut staff numbers on some trains to what they call unsafe levels. Mr Phillips says the only way for French-owned Transdev, which runs the trains, and South Korean maintenance company Hyundai Rotem to make more money from the fixed-price contract is to lower the cost of labour.
None of that saving goes back into the infrastructure in New Zealand. None of it goes back to the ratepayer. It comes out of the pockets of the rail workers of Wellington and goes directly overseas.
The Greater Wellington Regional Council is taking a hands-off approach to the dispute, at least for now. Here's the chair of the Regional Transport Committee, Councillor Barbara Donaldson.
If this happens again, or there's threats of more strikes, then maybe we'll need to intervene or to try to get the parties together ourselves. But at the moment, that's up to the parties to sort this out.
Resilience planning at most government departments is well advanced, with the threat of a big quake always looming over the capital. A spokesman for the State Services Commission says the strike was well publicised and people were able to plan. This allowed many public servants to carpool, travel early or, technology permitting, to work from home. The head of the Wellington Chamber of Commerce, John Milford, says last year's earthquake spurred many companies to rejig their IT systems to allow more people to work from home and keep their businesses operating. He says Wellingtonians are resilient folk anyway.
I mean, I'm standing in my office here and I'm looking at Victoria Car Park and there's empty car parking spaces there. You would have expected that to be absolutely chocker full. So people have made other arrangements.
Wellingtonians' resilience and patience may be tested, however. The union warns unless the company backs down on the proposed changes, there will be further strike action. For Checkpoint, Ruth Hill.
After almost 4 decades in power, it looks as if Robert Mugabe's iron grip on Zimbabwe has finally been broken. The army, which controls the streets of the capital Harare, denies that it's carried out a coup, but all the signs are there. The president's under house arrest, some of his senior ministers have also been detained, and his controversial wife Grace, who is positioning herself to become the next leader of the country, appears to have disappeared. The BBC's Shingai Nyoka reports from Harare.
For days now, there's been increasing political uncertainty here in Zimbabwe. But it all came to a head in the early hours of this morning. Heavy gunfire could be heard in parts of the capital as the army moved in to secure its hold, seizing the headquarters of the state broadcaster ZBC. Soon afterwards, a military spokesman, Major General Moyo, read out this statement.
The situation in our country has moved to another level. Firstly, we wish to assure the nation that His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, Comrade R.G. Mugabe, and his family are safe and sound, and their security is guaranteed.
The general denied that a coup had taken place, stressing that the military was targeting criminals associated with the president. There's been no official word from Mr. Mugabe. One man who has spoken to him, the South African president, Jacob Zuma, said Mr. Mugabe was under house arrest but was doing fine. Mr. Zuma called for calm and restraint.
I am hoping that the Defence Force will not move and do more damage, that they will be able to respect the Constitution of Zimbabwe as well as the people of Zimbabwe, so that this situation does not go beyond the situation where it is now.
President Mugabe was last seen in public a week ago. He looked frail and ill at an event where he renamed the country's main airport after himself. By his side was his wife Grace, his favoured candidate to succeed him. But it seems military leaders were unwilling to see that happen, with the army clearly blaming her for leading a faction within ZANU-PF intent on destroying all opposition. Nick Mangwana is the representative of ZANU-PF in London.
She accelerated the events that happened. She insulted and denigrated the military. She attacked commanders. She attacked civil servants. So the army felt that she had captured the state.
Grace Mugabe is now reported to be out of the country, apparently seeking protection in Namibia. For months now, she's been locked in a succession battle with the man favoured by the military, Emmerson Mnangagwa, who was fired as vice president last week. He saw himself as the front runner to succeed until his sacking and his flight into exile. The picture overall is one of uncertain quiet, with few people venturing out. Some people have expressed hope that there will soon be political change.
What is needed right now in Zimbabwe is to remove this Mugabe family in power.
If there is this implosion, the implosion is good for the citizenry of Zimbabwe.
Life for the majority of Zimbabweans has been one of extreme hardship. Many will be watching nervously how events unfold in the coming days.
That's Shingai Nyoka reporting there from Harare. A repeat sex offender who raped 3 of his cellmates has been given a sentence without end for the second time. William Katipa appeared at the High Court in Auckland today, where Justice Downs described him as unremorseful and dangerous. Our Auckland court reporter Edward Gay filed this report.
Katipa's criminal history is lengthy and horrific. He invaded a family home and raped a young mother in front of her 2-year-old daughter. He's also been found guilty of raping a 13-year-old girl and sentenced to preventive detention. But being in prison didn't stop him from offending. Katipa made sure fellow inmates at Waikato and Wiri South knew of his gang connections and that he was in for life. He had nothing to lose. The 51-year-old sized up his victims, threatening violence and in one case knocking his cellmate out before sexually abusing him. The Crown Prosecutor Natalie Walker said Katipa had offended against people he knew and complete strangers.
He has not been deterred by the presence of children, the proximity of prison guards, or the sternest sentence our law can impose.
Katipa's lawyer, Andrew Speed, said there wasn't much he could say, but Katipa had been in prison since 2000 and was now facing the prospect of another lengthy sentence.
When one's considering the overall sentence here, this, whatever way one looks at it, it's going to be a truly crushing sentence, and that is to be avoided in my respectful submission.
The evidence from the victims was disturbing. One was repeatedly raped and abused for a week before managing to change cells. Justice Downs said they had to give evidence and be cross-examined.
Each victim could be forgiven for thinking he was on trial. Indeed, your trial provides an obvious example of why victims can be reluctant to complain about sexual offences. The process can be traumatic, indeed harrowing.
Justice Downs said Katipa would cover the peephole on the cell door or get the victim to do it. He also knew help would take a long time to arrive, even if the cell's panic button was hit. Katipa threatened to kill all 3 if they told anyone.
You made it known to the victims you were a lifer and you had nothing to lose. You also made it known you were connected or had been connected to a gang. You told T you were a hitman.
Justice Downs said despite Katipa wanting to access rehabilitation programs for sex offenders inside prison, he still didn't admit the prison rapes.
You told the author of the pre-sentence report, Mr. Louis, you would maintain your innocence until I leave this planet.
The judge said Katipa posed a serious threat to the community and to prisoners and would not get treatment until he'd admitted what he'd done. It was revealed at trial that one of Katipa's victims is suing the Department of Corrections for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Another of his victims is asking for $75,000. A lawyer from the department was in court today for the sentencing. Corrections is carrying out a review of its cell sharing risk assessment process. Its terms of reference, released to RNZ News under the Official Information Act, say there have been recent incidents, and it's been found on occasion that staff didn't follow the correct process. Katipa's case followed that of Stephen Mark Gotti, a repeat sex offender with more than 140 previous convictions, who also sexually abused his cellmate. Mo te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Edward Gay aho.
The Supreme Court has been told that tooth decay is not a sufficiently serious type of disease to warrant the imposition of water fluoridation on a whole community. The submission was made by a lawyer acting for New Health New Zealand, a group fighting the fluoridation of drinking water supplies in the South Taranaki towns of Waverley and Patea. The action's a test case. The High Court and Court of Appeal have ruled against New Health's arguments, including its suggestion that the fluoridation of drinking water breaches a person's right to refuse medical treatment. Our reporter Anne-Marie Mays attended the Supreme Court hearing.
New Health's lawyer Mary Schultens QC told the Supreme Court that judges at the earlier hearings had not given appropriate consideration to a person's right to not be forced to undergo a medical treatment. She said generally the types of diseases that might need to be treated without consent would include those where other people were at risk.
So tooth decay obviously doesn't meet that threshold. We say it's not contagious, it's easily prevented, it's easily treated, poses no risk to third parties, but it's a manageable risk to the individual.
Mary Schultens also told the Supreme Court judges that the jury is still out on whether the substances used to fluoridate drinking water are safe and effective. The Court of Appeal and High Court had ruled that those compounds were not medicines, but she said they were also not the same chemicals as the medicine-grade substances used in fluoride tablets or toothpaste.
Hydrofluorosilicic acid, HFA, and sodium silicofluoride, SSF. They are the byproducts of superphosphate production. They are industrial-grade chemicals and may contain contaminants including mercury, arsenic and lead.
Mary Schultens said when the Court of Appeal considered the Bill of Rights question, it took a narrow reading of it, particularly Section 11, which guarantees a person's right to refuse medical treatment. She said the group she represents believes fluoride qualifies as a medical treatment, and that led to a discussion with the Supreme Court judges of other instances in which additives are put in products consumed by the community, such as iodine in salt or folic acid in bread. Ms Schultens said the key in those cases was that consumers have a choice, meaning the Bill of Rights was not an issue.
Because we have a choice. You do not have to buy those products, and you have a choice. Iodised, not iodised, folic acid, not folic acid. It doesn't engage the right.
Lawyers for the Crown will present their case tomorrow. For Checkpoint, Anne-Marie May.
With summer fast approaching, many people are looking forward to hitting their favourite river or lake for a chance to cool down. But in Canterbury, 4 popular swimming spots have now been declared unswimmable due to poor water quality. Logan Church reports.
The Canterbury Regional Council monitors faecal contamination across the region between November and March each year and releases a report revealing which rivers and lakes have improved and which have not. The Hiranui River is popular for swimming, kayaking and camping during the summer, but one of the most popular swimming holes, by the main road to Hamner Springs, is now unswimmable. Hiranui's mayor, Winton Daly, says this spot is a favourite among locals and tourists alike.
Our family and all the local families have regularly used that spot. It's been a popular camping ground there currently. Huge numbers of people camp there. Picnic area. Had a cricket club there for many years right there at that spot. So the local community has used that extensively for many, many years.
The council is unsure where the excrement that's causing problems in the Hiranui River is coming from, and testing is underway. But Winton Daly, who is also a farmer, says it's more likely to come from wildlife in the river than neighbouring farms.
There's no logic that it's farm related, but we do know there's considerable bird life, wild bird life in the river just upstream of that site. I don't know what's feasible in terms of whether they can be removed or moved to somewhere else. I really don't know. We'll have to talk to bird experts on that, I guess. But we have to first determine that is the cause.
The main beach at Lake Hood, a man-made recreational lake near Ashburton, is also now unswimmable. The Regional Council's chief scientist, Tim Davey, says bird excrement is one of the biggest problems there.
The management have recognised that it's a poor site and it's fundamentally to do with birds and the lake circulation. It's in a little backwater. They've had a raft there, the birds sit on it, and we've had a lot of faecal contamination there.
Overall, almost a quarter of the 52 monitored sites are unswimmable. Selwyn River, near the Selwyn Huts, has been unswimmable for some time, with intensive dairy farming being blamed by some locals. Mike Glover lives a stone's throw away from the river and says it's frustrating there has been no improvement.
Just a New Zealand thing, you got a river. You know, when I was a kid, you just jumped in anywhere, and certainly the Selwyn was like that. We're on such a wrong track here in Selwyn, especially. No, I don't have a lot of faith in the system.
It's not all bad news. 12 Canterbury swimming spots have improved, but this still falls short of a target set by the council in 2009 to have 80% of freshwater sites swimmable by 2015. Tim Davies says a significant investment in time and resources is needed to bring our rivers and lakes up to scratch.
Keeping stock out of waterways is the first step. Good riparian management is the second. And then the third thing I'd say is really good infrastructure in urban environments.
But there's hope for Cantabrians looking for a cool dip in the future. Tim Davies still thinks almost all sites can be made swimmable in the next 5 to 10 years. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Logan Church.
And lots of feedback coming in tonight, and a lot of it on the story of the family who have become very sick after eating wild boar. This listener says, of the 70-odd members of my extended family, which eat game meat at least twice a week, we've never had a sickness associated with it in the last 30 plus years. Well, we love to get your feedback. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening. Ko Katrina Batanaho. Peru have beaten the All Whites 2-0 in their Football World Cup qualifier in Lima, meaning New Zealand won't be at the showpiece event in Russia next year. In front of 50,000 local fans, Peru sealed their spot at the World Cup for the first time since 1982. Here's our sports editor, Stephen Hewson.
Peru dominated possession and territory throughout the match. The first goal came half an hour into the game when Jefferson Farfan rifled a shot past New Zealand goalkeeper Stefan Marinovic from just inside the penalty box. After half-time, the English Premier League striker Chris Wood came on for the All Whites and immediately lifted the team. But just as the All Whites looked to be fighting their way back into the match, Peru sealed the win with their second goal. It came from a seemingly innocuous corner which bobbled into the box and was picked up by Christian Ramos, who slotted it much to the delight of the home crowd. Chris Wood had New Zealand's best scoring opportunity late in the game when he had a one-on-one with Peru's keeper, but his shot went wide. This is Stephen Hewson.
The head of the Game Animal Council says thousands of people eat wild pork every day, and he's never heard of anyone getting seriously ill from eating game meat. 3 members of a family are in Waikato hospital with suspected food poisoning from eating wild pork. A family friend says they're in a vegetative state. The hospital is investigating potential sources for the illness, including wild pork meat. However, the chairman of Game Animal Council, Don Hammond, says he thinks there's more to the illness than eating the meat.
Thousands of people every day in New Zealand eat wild pork that's been caught in the bush. That's a major source of protein in many small rural areas. And I've never heard of anybody getting sick from meat that's been looked after properly.
Don Hammond says it's not possible to eat enough meat to get secondary poisoning from toxins. A mental health respite centre in a Porirua neighbourhood is to move after a patient tried to abduct the child. In March, the 32-year-old man tried to grab a 3-year-old girl who was with her father. A report released today says a less experienced staff member was in charge of assessing the man, and he was put in a facility that wasn't suitable. And it says the level of staffing at the respite house was below a safe level. The Capital and Coast DHB's Nigel Fairley says the centre isn't big enough to take the changes recommended in the report.
So the decision has been made to move it. We will do that in a systematic and thoughtful way, so there's no time frame around that.
Nigel Fairley says staffing at the respite centre has been increased. Suburbs on Auckland's fringes and in cheaper areas look set for higher than average rates rises next year. Ratepayers will have to wait another week to be able to check whether their individual property will be above or below next year's average rise. Region-wide, properties rose by an average of 45% in the last 3 years, but homes in parts of the northwest and cheaper southern suburbs rose by more than 60%. The biggest mover was rural Pairata, where the rezoning of former rural land for housing pushed average values up by 150%. There's been little opposition to the Zimbabwean military, which has now taken full control of the country. Many people in the capital, Harare, seemed to have accepted their long-time ruler, Robert Mugabe, as being eased from office. Key allies have deserted his wife, Grace, whose rise to prominence led to the military intervention. The BBC's Anne Soy has the latest from Harare.
The last of Africa's independence leaders is set to exit in humiliation, a historic moment many people in and outside Zimbabwe have been waiting for. Mr. Mugabe survived the paralyzing economic sanctions imposed by the West, as well as pressure applied by a once vibrant opposition. But his fall has come from within his inner circle. His wife's ambition to succeed him has all but ended his long rule. His other likely successor is the former Vice President Emmerson Mnangagwa. His sacking last week has precipitated the current political situation. The whereabouts of both Mr. Mnangagwa and Mrs. Mugabe remain unknown.
And Soy reporting. The country's top court has been told tooth decay is not a sufficiently serious disease to warrant imposing water fluoridation on a whole community. The submission was made by a lawyer acting for New Health New Zealand, a group fighting the fluoridation of drinking water supplies in the Taranaki towns of Waverley and Pārtea. The group's lawyer, Mary Schultens QC, told the Supreme Court the Bill of Rights gives people the right to refuse medical treatment. However, she said the bill usually applies to diseases where a failure to treat could put others at risk.
So tooth decay obviously doesn't meet that threshold. We say it's not contagious, it's easily prevented, it's easily treated, poses no risk to third parties, but it's a manageable risk to the individual.
And Mary Schultens told the Supreme Court judges the jury is still out on whether the substances used to fluoridate drinking water are safe and effective. Some of the country's best-known musicians will vie for top honours at the New Zealand Music Awards. The awards for artists across 20 categories kick off at Auckland's Spark Arena at 8:30. The Onehunga rap crew Swidit is the frontrunner this year with 6 nominations. Lord, Aldous Harding and Nadia Reid follow with 3 or more nominations each. It's 6:05. Sport and the New Zealand women's team have made a winning start to their Rugby League World Cup campaign, crushing Canada 50-4 in their opening pool game in Sydney. The Kiwi Ferns scored 9 tries to Canada's 1. They next play the Cook Islands on Sunday. New Zealand have won 3 of the past 4 tournaments but lost to Australia in 2013. Meanwhile, the Samoa men's coach Matt Parrish has branded the Players' Union as toothless in his continued fight for pay equality in the League World Cup. Members of the Australian team will be paid $50,000 each for the tournament, while the Samoan players get just over $1,200 each. The teams meet in the first men's quarter-final tomorrow night. South African rugby is in a state of shock after they were overlooked as hosts for the 2023 World Cup, despite being recommended by World Rugby. Instead, its council voted for France. Chester Williams, who won the World Cup in 1995, says it's very disappointing for South Africa as a nation.
We are such a divided country at the moment right now, and hopefully that would have been an opportunity for us as South Africans to reunite again like we did in 1995. And I think the world of rugby has missed out on a big opportunity to reunite South Africa.
Former South African representative Chester Williams. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, this week's cultural ambassador Miles Buckingham says goodbye to Jamaica and begins a new series on the reggae of Aotearoa. Our Changing World visits a garden designed to look like Gisborne in 1769, the year Cook arrived, when it wasn't Gisborne. And Jaya Beach Robertson talks about her new feminist-infused web-only comedy, Pussy. Sounds perfect for the radio on Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland to Whanganui, including Coromandel Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country, also Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Scattered showers today, mainly inland, some heavy and thundery with hail south of Auckland and Taupō. Mainly fine tomorrow, apart from isolated showers about the ranges and eastern Northland. Manawatu to Wellington, also Wairarapa, mostly fine today. Cloudy periods tomorrow with isolated showers, mainly about the ranges. Nelson, Buller and Westland, fine spells, isolated afternoon and evening showers about the ranges. Marlborough and Canterbury, mainly fine today, cloud and a few showers developing tomorrow. Otago and Southland, mainly fine, scattered showers spreading north overnight, clearing tomorrow afternoon. Fiordland, patchy drizzle developing by evening, turning to widespread rain overnight, becoming fine tomorrow. And the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods with the odd shower tomorrow. It's 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks, Katrina. Well, the All Whites' hopes of reaching a third Football World Cup are over. They've been beaten 2-0 by Peru in Lima. New Zealand had high hopes going into the match, having drawn the first leg 0-0 in Wellington at the weekend. But in front of 50,000 parochial fans, Peru dominated from the outset, going up 1-0 half an hour into the match.
Quaver into the area, dangerous, on the edge, chance now, they've scored, they have opened the scoring. Peru have the goal that they've been looking for, and the goal comes from Jefferson Farfan. 1-0 Peru.
Well, it remained 1-0 at half-time, and just as the All Whites looked to be fighting their way back into the match, Peru gained a corner 20 minutes into the second half.
Pressure on the Kiwis. Well, again, it's in the area, and they've scored a second. They've scored a second. They've got more than 1 foot now in Russia. They're on the way, are they, Peru? The goal scored by Christian Ramos, 2-0 Peru. The tie is theirs to lose.
And that commentary courtesy of Sky TV. Well, joining us now from our Wellington studio is our sports reporter Joe Porter. Hi Joe, it was always going to be a big ask. Can we console ourselves with that?
Yeah, absolutely. It was always going to be tough to go to Peru and score away goals in front of those parochial and loud 50,000 fans. The All Whites did incredibly well to hold Peru to a scoreless draw in Wellington and set this match up to be the thrilling, exciting affair it was. Fair play to the All Whites. They're ranked 122nd in the world compared to Peru's 10, so you'd have to say a fair reflection of the two sides, and Peru dominated the game and deserved to win.
And where do you think it was that it all went wrong?
Oh, the All Whites just couldn't really match the Peruvians in terms of their skill levels. Peru just held on to the ball for most of the match. They dominated possession, barely let the All Whites have it. When the All Whites did get it, they turned it over fairly quickly with erroneous passes and I guess a lack of a little bit of communication and first touch ability there. So certainly the Peruvians dominated possession. They controlled the game from the outset, and while New Zealanders created 1 or 2 chances, the Peruvians really did dominate and control the match, and I guess kind of the outcome was a foregone conclusion once they went 2-0 up.
What were the standout moments for you, Joe?
Well, in the very first minute or so, there was a New Zealand player pulled down in the penalty box and a penalty shout went ignored by the referee, which was very interesting. No replays, of course, by the host broadcaster so that no one could have a look within the ground. That went ignored, and then I guess Peru's first goal turned the match, and that was it, really. From then on, they dominated. New Zealand, again in the second half, they started creating a few opportunities. Peru then quickly turned it around and scored again, and really I guess that was the death knell for the New Zealanders. So some standout moments. Chris Wood near the very end of the game got a one-on-one with the keeper but couldn't quite put it away. Some good play from the Kiwis, from the All Whites, and you'd have to suggest that they were just beaten by a better side.
Yeah, Chris Wood looked pretty good when he came on, and there's been a bit of chat about whether he should have started. What do you think about that?
Yeah, perhaps he should have. I know he's been under an injury cloud, and he struggled in that first leg in Wellington in particular. Again, under an injury cloud tonight. So if he had been fully fit, he may have made the difference, because he certainly looked like New Zealand's best chance of scoring. He was, I guess, their talisman and their spark tonight. So yeah, perhaps he should have started. I'm not sure how heavy or how bad that injury was and how much it hampered him.
Hey, but Joe, there is something to hold on to. The women's rugby league teams had a win. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, great start to the Rugby League World Cup campaign for the Kiwi Ferns, a 50-4 hammering of Canada and Sydney. The Kiwi Ferns have won this tournament 3 times in recent years. They lost the last one in 2013 to Australia, but they've been very good historically here. The next game's against the Cook Islands on Sunday, another big win, you'd assume, from the Kiwi Ferns, and hopefully they are a bright spot this weekend after the All Whites' dream has been dashed.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for joining us. That's our sports reporter, Joe Porter, there in Wellington. Well, 3 members of a Putaruru family are facing permanent paralysis after eating what might have been contaminated wild boar. Shibu Kochuman, his wife Subi Babu and his mother Alakati Daniel remain in a serious condition in Waikato hospital after eating the boar for dinner last Friday night. The couple's 7- and 1-year-old daughters are being cared for by members of their church. One of those church members, Sojan Joseph, says he got a call from a friend at Waikato Hospital on Friday asking for him to come in and identify the family who were paralysed and in a vegetative state.
They were just wondering if we know the person who was admitted at the hospital, because they couldn't identify who it was. So we rushed to the hospital, and the outcome was a bit shocking, because all we could see was our friend and his wife and his mother, in a state where they're like close to death. So we just didn't know what to do. We just didn't know where their kids were. So it was I don't know, it was such an emotional scene for all of us, and we just really didn't know what to do, and we didn't even know where the kids was, and we found out later on that the kids are with their neighbor. So we got their kids from Peru, that's where they are from originally, and we got them in with one of our families, so they are looking after them. They're from our church. So that's how I know Shibu and his family. We attend the same church, and we are a close-knit community. And and it's been like 6 days, and it's very hard to see. I did go see him yesterday, and they pretty much remain in the same state, and he's not like able to talk, or he's not even responding to like any of us or the surroundings. So we just really don't know what's going on.
Another family friend, Joji Varghese, told me Shibu Kochaman, who lives in Putaruru, had gone hunting for wild boar with his friends, and he and his wife and mother had eaten it for dinner before falling ill and calling an ambulance.
Now, this is the tricky part, because it's the process of elimination. The children have basically consumed everything else in whatever else they have consumed, with the exception of the wild boars. So by a process of elimination, the doctors think it is definitely some sort of poisoning within the boar itself. So maybe the boars consumed poison before it was shot down, and whatever was in its blood has found its way into theirs. Otherwise, without a proper toxicology report, they are not able to answer that question. The toxicology report is expected tomorrow. So once that comes through, a proper treatment plan will be put in place.
Mr Varghese said the family has no relatives in New Zealand, and the church is fundraising to bring caregivers from India to care for the couple's children and pay grandmother Alakati Daniels' medical bills.
Mrs. Daniels is here on a visitor's visa, and a part of that process of applying for a visitor's visa is they will need the sponsor to pick up any medical costs that are associated. She was obviously ticked that box, but she does not have any medical insurance. And so this hospital bill is going to spiral out of control, especially because the estimated recovery time is somewhere between 4 to 6 months. That's part of the reason why we're doing this fundraising. The other part is when their immediate family does come over from India, they will need a place to stay. There will be costs associated around just daily life. The children will be with them, so there will be costs associated with that. Like I said, our initial plan was to send the children back home to their grandparents, but if they're going to continue here for 6 months, I expect the elder child to be bored out of her skin if she just stays at home doing nothing. She was attending school in Peru before this, so we'll have to find her admission to some school here in Hamilton, give her something to do, keep her occupied while all of this is happening.
Well, that was Joji Varghese, who was talking to me earlier about the family who have been left paralysed, possibly after eating wild boar. Well, Auckland is now officially $1 million city, with the average value of the city's 253 suburbs, according to the Auckland Council, jumping 45% since 2014. That average now sits at $1,070,000. Standout areas are Waiheke Island, Papakura and Papatoetoe o Tara, which all rose more than 60%. But some rural areas absolutely soared. In Waitoki, 35 minutes north of the CBD, the council says house values have risen 102%. But a local real estate agent says actually, in reality, they haven't. And now the area's rates will unfairly double. I spoke to Simone Du Bernard from Harcourts earlier this afternoon.
No, I don't think it's a fair reflection. Been in the business for the last 14 years and living in the area, the prices have gone up. I wouldn't say they've gone up that much. According to the last 4 or 5 years, they've been going up slowly, like 6%, 9%, 12%. And last year they were roughly up about 47%. So no, me personally, that's just my opinion. I don't think that they have gone up 102%. We don't really work with a CV in the country because we don't have exact comparisons like we do in residential. Most of the properties are different. Even if they're 5 acres, they might be sloping, north-facing, south-facing, flat. There's just so many variables for the country properties that it is hard to say, yep, that's the CV, that's the price of the property. Sounds like,
either going by what the council's saying or by perhaps your more modest estimation of a decent price rise, that Waitoki's doing pretty well. What is it that is attracting people there?
I believe that with Millwater so close, it is a high-dense residential area. A lot of families have bought into these areas and have decided that it's too dense for their families and would like to move out a little bit. They can move out just down the road, get 5 acres with a nice house for less than what they're getting in Millwater, which is 500 square metres, garden with a big house on it. They're probably paying average 1.5 there, and in Wanui they'll pay for 5 acres, 1.5 to 2 million. So they're getting more land, they're getting more freedom for their kids.
And that is Waitoki real estate agent Simone du Bernard. Well, the Alabama Republican Senate nominee Roy Moore's campaign is pushing back on multiple allegations of sexual misconduct following media reports involving a string of women. There have been calls for Mr Moore to pull out of the race for the Senate seat, but he continues to deny all the claims against him. The BBC's Rajani Vaidyanathan reports from Alabama.
Out on the campaign trail, Roy Moore was defiant as he hit back at allegations of sexual assault.
I'm now facing allegations, and that's all the press want to talk about. But I want to talk about the issues. I want to talk about where this country's going.
In the past week, 5 women have come forward accusing him of sexual misconduct, dating back several decades. He denies the claims. The youngest says she was just 14 when she was sexually assaulted. Beverly Young Nelson says she was 16 when he forced himself on her.
I thought that he was going to rape me. I was twisting and I was struggling and I was begging him to stop.
The former judge is no stranger to controversy. He's pro-gun, anti-gay, doesn't believe in evolution, and once said Islam was a false religion. At a gathering at the Montgomery Country Club, the majority of voters we talked to weren't troubled by the allegations.
You can't tell how old anybody is down here in the South, that's for sure, because, some of these girls look like they're 20, and some of them look like they're 14, but I don't know. That's why I say I just feel it's really suspicious that it took them 40 years for anybody to come forward.
I think they've been put up to it, okay? There may have been some problems 40 years. I don't know about all that. But I will say this, Judge Moore is a righteous man, he's a good man, and he wants to win for this country.
Unfortunately, in this state, I think he's still going to win. I don't think he should.
Here and across this state, there's still huge support for Roy Moore. Many say they don't like being told what to do and believe that this is a political conspiracy conceived by the Democrats. But beyond these quarters, there's growing pressure on Roy Moore to step aside. Back in Washington, senior Republicans have been lining up to denounce him.
Roy Moore should step aside. The women who've come forward are entirely credible. He's obviously not fit to be in the United States Senate.
Fresh from his trip to Asia, Donald Trump will now have to decide how to deal with this unfolding scandal. A year ago, he himself was the subject of sexual assault allegations, which he denied. But they didn't hurt his path to the White House. With Roy Moore still ahead in the polls, it might not make a difference in this race either.
That report from the BBC. A soldier's been dismissed from the army today after admitting he threatened to share nude photos of his sometime girlfriend if she wouldn't let him meet her parents. Thomas Evans was also given a serious reprimand in order to pay his victim $1,000. Rachel Graham attended the court-martial at Burnham military camp.
Thomas Evans met the woman he would later threaten in 2013, and they started an on-again, off-again relationship. Defence Force prosecutor Colonel Craig Rowan says the woman, whose name is suppressed, had made it clear that she planned to head overseas.
In the month leading up to the complainant moving to the United Kingdom, the accused said that he wanted to meet her family
and wanted her to tell her family about him. The complainant did not want to do so. The accused said that he would turn up at the airport to see her family and to meet them. The accused threatened that if the complainant did not tell her parents about him, he was going to post referred to as nudie Rudy photos on the internet and send them to her friends.
Colonel Rowan says the woman pleaded with him not to release the photos.
The complainant told the accused that publication of the photographs would ruin her career and would affect her family, and she said that it would destroy her career and her life. The accused responded with various threats and abuse. On 8 March 2014, Private Evans engaged in a conversation on Facebook Messenger with the complainant. The conversation progressed along the lines of the complainant begging Private Evans not to post photos and videos online and not to send the photos or videos to her friends, and Private Evans taunting her about how every guy is going to know what she looks like naked.
Colonel Rowan says Evans did send 3 topless photos of the woman to a friend who says he has destroyed them. The woman made a complaint to military police, but it was not followed up until they started investigating other complaints about Evans. Colonel Rowan says the military police felt that since it was a one-off situation and the woman had moved overseas, that the issue was resolved. Defence for Thomas Evans, Tony Gregg, says Evans now admits the offending, but he was in an unhappy time of his life when it happened. He says the slow process of dealing with the charges, starting in 2014 when he was first questioned by military police, had been difficult for Evans and kept him in the army much longer than he had wanted.
So for this one-off offence committed 3.5 years ago, he is now still waiting to hear what his fate should be. But he does welcome the opportunity to pay compensation because he would like to make an apology in person. That's not possible because, as we know, the complainant is overseas.
Chief Judge Kevin Reardon says the offending was abusive and callous. He says Evans wanted to control the woman and to make her feel threatened and scared. Justice Reardon says dismissal from the army was the second most serious punishment a court-martial can hand out. He says although a severe reprimand may not sound serious, it is to make it clear that the army will not accept such behaviour. It will also remain on Evans' record. Evans was also sentenced to 4 months detention in July after pleading guilty to 8 charges of using and supplying cannabis and ecstasy. Justice Reardon says the punishment for cyberbullying had recently been strengthened, and anyone found guilty in the future could expect to be dismissed from the Defence Force and face a jail sentence.
The creme de la creme of the New Zealand music industry has dusted off their suits and donned their gowns ahead of the Music Awards in Auckland tonight. The ceremony attracted controversy last year after singer-songwriter Aradna refused to accept the award for Best Urban Hip Hop Album, saying she felt she was lumped into what was being treated as a category for brown artists. Well, this year her recommendations have been taken on board and there have been changes to the awards format. The red carpet event's just about to kick off outside the Spark Arena, where RNZ's own Alex Bean is strutting his stuff. Hi Alex, what's happening there now?
Kia ora, Rowan. Well, viewers will be able to see that behind me is the most electrifying group in hip-hop, Sweat, who were the recipient of the award that Aradna would not take last year. They're nominated for several awards this year, and yes, the changes have been made to the awards. There's no longer a Best Urban Hip-Hop category. That's been divided into Best Hip Hop and Best Soul and R&B. Other changes to the categories this year, they've done away with gender. There's no Best Female or Best Male Solo Artist, it's just a solo artist. And albums are no longer being recognised. You used to have Best Pop Album, Best Rock Album, now it's Best Pop Artist and Best Rock Artist. The red carpet event has begun in earnest down here in Auckland Central. It is a lovely, lovely day. There's probably about 100 or 120 or so fans lining the carpet, which isn't red this year for some inexplicable reason.
So I guess a bit of a difference to the award then with all the awards with all those different categories, but I guess we'd be expecting that Lord would be dominating a few, whatever they are.
Oh, I think so. As you said, musicians are getting dressed up in suits for this occasion. As a friend of mine just Snapchatted, this is the one day of the year that we're not at gigs in jeans and leather jackets and looking tatty. And Lord has changed what is possible for New Zealand musicians. She's achieved something that no other artist has. I think she's in 6 categories tonight. I would be highly surprised if she didn't sweep all 6 of those categories. Her second album, Melodrama, has been one of the best received albums of the year by both critics and fans alike, and she has certainly sold the most, done the most internationally. I'd be very surprised if she doesn't take pretty much all of them.
Yes, picking up a bit on what you said there, Alex, about the Flash Awards ceremony, there's been a bit of criticism of having such a glitzy production when a lot of musicians actually struggle to make ends meet these days.
Well, yes, that's true. If you speak to Recorded Music New Zealand, you know, they will show you the figures that there has been a double-digit increase in music revenue for the second year running after 15 years of the music industry being in decline. And certainly, I think the figures were $88 million this year. But I would imagine that the majority of that, again, is mainly just laud. A lot of musicians are in that next tier down, struggling to make ends meet, working their musician butts off day in, day out, week in, week out for very little return. Streaming has changed absolutely everything for artists, and there's no quite clear way forward as to how everybody's going to make money.
Hey, well, look, Alex, thanks for that, and have a wonderful night. That's Alex B in there at the Music Awards, and that is Checkpoint for this evening. Thanks for tuning in to join us on your radio, your TV, online, or however you did it, and have a lovely evening.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Peru have beaten the All Whites 2-0 in their Football World Cup qualifier in Lima. 3 members of a family are seriously ill in Waikato Hospital with suspected food poisoning from eating wild pork. A mental health respite centre in a Porirua neighbourhood is to move after a patient tried to abduct a child. And the average home in Auckland is now valued officially at more than $1 million. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Remember the days when Mark Heitzel was serenading the iconic Johnny Mathis?
I lay all my songs at Johnny Mathis's feet.
You'll be hearing this American Music Club song and other Heitzel music when I introduce his latest outing, Hey Mr. Ferryman.
How to live.
Join me, William Dart, for New Horizons, tonight at 7:30, during Nights with Brian Crump.